welcome to our next session, Beyond SDCs, that's single directory components, mentoring next generation ideas for tomorrow's Drupal experts. My name is Matt Hand. I'm a senior software engineer, and I'm presenting with Daniel O'Connor. He's a senior front-end engineer with Evolving Web. And part of my unofficial responsibilities, I'm an unofficial ambassador for Washington, D.C.'s go-go music. And I know there's a lot of news coming out about Washington, D.C. I wanted everybody to know that the people of Washington, D.C. love everybody, and we have a wonderful subgenre of music called go-go, and it's based on funk, and it's very specific. It has Caribbean themes in there, it has congas and drums, hand drumming. It's a wonderful music to talk about, to explore, and I'll be bringing up some more go-go tips for you later on. It is the official music of Washington, D.C., as declared by our mayor. And our agenda today, we're going to be talking about the component landscape, getting into custom elements manifest, how to define these web components for yourself in automatic ways, ideas on how we can integrate these web components with single directory components. And then I'm going to work into a mentorship strategy that is based on a lot of my recent experience. And we'll go through what we're planning on doing with this Custom Elements Manifest in a mentorship program. And let me introduce you to Daniel O'Connor, Senior Front-End Engineer at Evolving Web. Please give him a round of applause.
Cool, so first things first, I'm going to talk about the component landscape. So one of my big pet peeves in this industry is when we talk about components, everyone has a slightly different idea in their head, right? So designers will have their own idea of what a component is. Programmers, they'll have a subtly different idea in their head. You talk to people from sales or project managers, everyone's talking about slightly different things. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, I just want to try and clear up a few things. So basically, components are just chunks of stuff. So sometimes we like to think of them as particular pieces of UI, right? But in my opinion, that's kind of a little bit too specific. At a company I used to work for example, we would call parts of the CMX components, right? So in Drupal, what you would call paragraphs or blocks, we would use the term component for that. And so it means a bunch of different things. In terms of designers, I don't know if there's any designers in the room, but hands up if there's any designers in here.
Scared them off.
No, they've all been scared away, yep. But in the design world, so okay, there's a bit of overlap here. You have things like buttons, you have things like a news card, the hero block at the top of a website, that is also a component. But the difference here is that when designers are thinking of these things, they're always thinking in terms of making up a big part of the design system. So at the basis of that, you have atomic things like colors, font sizes, font families. All these are coming through into the components, and the components are really an expression of those things. So they're always visual, right? If you're thinking as a programmer, I've worked in React a lot in the past. So there's a lot of overlap here. You do have things like buttons and use cards and things like that. But you also might isolate something like a contact form, right? As a coder, it makes sense to spin that off as a separate component. Designers will be a bit confused by that and think, what's going on here? That's not in my design system. So we've got some different concerns here as programmers. They also might be doing things that are not even visual at all, right? Like state management, data fetching. So there's a little bit of there's a bit of a discord between designers and developers here sometimes. And primarily we're thinking about reusability, right? So you might go through a project and you identify a new component based on something that's being done a bunch of different times, and you want to spin that off as a component, even though it's not really part of a design system. So now that we've covered those two, let's try and cover SDCs. So SDCs are a relatively new thing in Drupal. It's basically Drupal's way of handling design components. So it's sort of similar to like a React component, but obviously they're always visual, they're always outputting HTML in the end. And basically the core feature here is they're all wrapped up in a single directory. So they're all in one single folder. And you can have, at the core you need the twig file, you need a YAML file, you could have a CSS file, or you don't necessarily need that if you're using Tailwind. You could have a JavaScript file in there as well. But they're a little bit more portable than something like, the way that you might use the UI pattern, which is a little bit more generic. So here we're having all of it in one single directory, more portable. You could include it from a Drupal module. And here's an example. So this is a website I worked on earlier this year. This is CaiHi, the Canadian Institute of Health Information. And here you can see just one example of an SDC we did for them there. That's an article card, and it's being included here as part of this bigger molecule type component as well. And if I haven't talked about components enough, we also have web components. So this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing and where sometimes people get a little bit lost, but basically a web component, or a custom element as they're sometimes called, is a way to create your own HTML element, which sometimes feels a little bit magic, right? Here I've got one called Daniel Card. You can basically pick whatever name you want. The only constraint is really that you put a hyphen in the name. And just like React components or Vue components, you can basically have all of those extra features like lifecycle methods. You can trigger certain actions when they're added to the DOM or when they're removed from the DOM. But they have the really big advantage of being natively supported by the browser. And these have been around for a little while. They haven't really caught on until lately, but actually they were proposed as far back as like 2011. I think in 2013 they really started to have their first implementation, but they haven't really caught on until lately because people are a little bit unfamiliar with them. It's hard to get them into your normal front-end workflow. If you're already using something like React to build your site, it's a real pain to work these in there. What else have we got in there? Oh, there's also the shadow DOM as well. That's one of the core features which encapsulates a whole bunch of HTML and styles and kind of locks it away. It can be a little bit hard to work with existing front-end workflows if you're using the shadow DOM as well. And now let's talk about the custom elements manifest. So basically, this is kind of defined using the custom elements manifest JSON file. So this is basically a descriptor of all of the custom elements in your project. It's going to be all in one place, so it's going to describe not only their location, but also various properties, attributes, events. It's going to have that all in this one place. And the idea is that every web component, every custom element in your project will be cataloged in this one JSON file. There's a lot of benefits there. You could use that to spin up an instance of Storybook, which automatically brings through all those components. You could use that in your IDE, like Visual Studio Code might want to tap into that as well to give you hints on like what components you have available. So there's a lot of different use cases there. And here's an example of like what that JSON file might look like. So you can customize this a little bit, but there are some core features that you always need to have in there. A bunch of other stuff that's not shown here. But here you can see the tag name, description. You don't want to be coding this by hand though, so we're also going to look next at this analyzer tool. So along with it comes this analyzer tool, which is going to look into your project and basically see all the different components that you're using. So if you're using a component library like lit, for example, which has a lot of different web components, it's going to search through that and actually bring through all the ones that you're using and link them into that manifest file as well. And this comes with plugins as well, so it can be really helpful. For example, let's say your project is a React-based thing. Like I said before, it's really hard to get these components working with React components. The dialogue between them can be a little bit difficult, so maybe you want to spin up a React component that automatically wraps a web component. So there's a plugin, for example, to do that. Or for example, if you had like some sort of JavaScript comment that's going to catalog something about your components, you could have that automatically come into the manifest file as well through a plugin. You can create your own plugins as well. So how does this tie back to SDCs? Well, basically, like I was saying before, this is such a pain point, right? Like, in a couple of projects I worked on this year, we have been, writing these YAML files by hand, or at least trying to. It's really error-prone. It's easy to make mistakes when you're typing YAML files by hand. It's time-consuming. It's really hard to code review as well. Like, anyone trying to look for mistakes in this is going to really have a hard time. And you can see this lady here is really, really having a tough time with that. And she's typing even with one hand, which makes it even more difficult. So she's really got her work cut out for her there. So this is Matt's concept, so he's going to talk about that soon. But basically, if we already have a manifest file in our project, wouldn't it be great if we could use that to actually automatically create our SDC definition files, right? If we have all our web components automatically cataloged in that file, we could then read that and have a drush command that automatically actually creates all those definition files. And before I hand it over to Matt, I'll talk a little bit about our Drupal training. So there's some of you in the room that you can see in this photo too. But yeah, basically the mentoring side of this talk, which Matt's going to go over, this is mostly you can think of it as like a bottom-up kind of thing, right? Like if you're being mentored, it's a really, it's something you really have to take ownership over yourself. Training programs, if you have the initiative here in the room and you know some people that you really want to get involved more in Drupal, we offer a lot of things here. Back-end development, module development, front-end development, theming, or even like site building skills, we offer those here at the company as well. So, but now I'll hand it over to Matt to maybe talk a little bit more about his mentoring program.
Thank you, Daniel. I do want to go back to the Explore New Concept slide. So this is not built. This is unproven concept. However, I've seen solutions similar to this in several large enterprises. Everybody is doing this in a proprietary way, using JavaScript tools. What I would like to see is as much of this that can exist as a Drupal module, which would be the part where you give it the manifest file, it's able to execute, generate, using Drush, because Drush has a generate command that's very useful. You'd be able to generate these single directory components. Now, how are we going to get there? That's what I'm going to talk about now. Brief interruption for more go-go trivia. So this is a photo of Chuck Brown. He is the godfather of go-go. He is one of the most well-known people in Washington, D.C. People know him, like the people of Washington, D.C. know him better than some of the presidents. I guarantee it. And go-go music thrives on audience participation. So I wanted to do a brief exercise explaining several of their types of call-outs and then practice one with you. The first one is they do birthday shout-outs. Is there anybody with a birthday in the room? No, it's a small room, so I didn't expect that one. But imagine you're at a concert and your birthday, you're celebrating your birthday, you tell the musicians it's your birthday, they write you into their song. They put your name in their song. That's how cool the go-go musicians are in DC. They also do neighborhood call-outs. So they call out for Northwest DC, they call out for Southeast DC, they call out for Prince George's County, Maryland, which is actually where I live. But for instance, it would be like Kensington Market here. Who's from Kensington Market? And people would call out and celebrate that. But the last one is the call and response. I'd like to practice that with you. That's when, you've done this before, the speaker will say, when I say this, you say that, okay? So, and then if it's not really good audience participation, the speaker makes you do it over and over and over again, right? So let's try and be really loud. We're gonna do this one time. When I say evolve, you say Drupal. Evolve. Drupal. Evolve. Drupal. very cool. Thank you so much. And to get back to mentoring, what our strategy is, essentially what I use mentoring for, I take projects that have high impact but low priority. Stuff in your enterprise that's never going to get resourced, right? However, you know if you actually invested in this, it would save tons of time. We'd be automating all these processes. But for some reason, the client work comes in, it always takes precedence. These types of projects are perfect for internships, mentorships. What you want to do is bundle them together and offer them to up-and-coming developers, and then guide them through the process. And it's based on knowing that web development is actually a skilled trade. I know there's a lot of high education degrees out there, computer science, all of that. However, everybody learns through experience with web developer. You can graduate college and you're still going to have the same learning curve that other people would have, because you have to learn through experience. You learn from people that have more experience than you. That's just naturally how we learn web development. And what I'd like to do is create shared collaborative teams of mentors, because that also increases the amount of retention that they have. They're learning these skills. They're keeping these skills. They're sharing them with other people. They learn how to train people through this whole process. It's also, I've noticed that we have a gap of new developers in the Drupal community. Those developers are going elsewhere. They want to learn Node.js. They want to be paid less than PHP developers. I don't know why, but that's what's happening. And I want to instead attract that talent back into the Drupal space, teach them Drupal, get them excited about Drupal, get them to understand all the awesome features that PHP has. And through mentorship, that's how you do it. It's a very intentional process. The other thing that I've noticed too is through mentorship, you're able to really be intentional about improving diversity in your organization, which is always a challenge in web development. But this way you're able to identify star performers, you're able to identify people that are going to perform well and help them get invited into these opportunities. And then you want to make sure too that you're cultivating a diverse group of developers that have diverse opinions, diverse experiences to draw from. This allows you to do that. What I would hope today is that some of you get excited about the potential for mentoring in your organization after this talk. So when we're talking about how to mentorship, there's many different models, right? If you're a large organization, you should be doing a large mentorship program. You should be sending out email invites. We want you to be a mentor. We want you to be a mentee. What's great about these programs, even though it's formal, they're self-guided. The people that organize the mentorship programs, they're just doing it on part-time effort. It's not hard. The people that do the effort are all the ones participating. And I also want to normalize the fact that you're not it's not like you start out as a mentee and then one day you've learned enough and now you're a mentor. That's just not how it works. There's always an opportunity to be mentored. Even if you're, a director, there's a CEO out there that might want to mentor you, if you asked. So the fact that it's not like you have to play one role. Right now, I'm a mentor and I'm a mentee myself in a mentorship program. And you gain a lot from understanding both sides. And the other important part of the mentorship programs, it's about the one-to-one relationship. So you don't want to have one mentor and 3 mentees. You want to have one mentor and one mentee. That's how it works. That the mentee feels like they're supported, they feel like they're getting prioritized, and then the mentor is not overloaded. You're not managing. That's not what this is about. What you're trying to do is help this person learn new skills, how to problem solve, give them the confidence that they didn't have before. Other things that are really important, you want to help them identify their goals early on. So technical goals, personal goals, career goals, it's all on the table because it's what the mentee is asking for, that is what should be given. So it's better to have a loose framework and then allow for like some self-guided experience through that. I think you end up with like much better mentees at the end of it. The other thing that's really important, you can't just like do it part-time and give up, or like see them every 2 weeks or once a month. This is like something that needs to happen every week. You're touching base with your mentee, you're touching base with your mentor, you're reporting progress on your goals, and then you add on additional effort from there. So if there's a goal that you want to meet, you add another meeting for that week, and you work specifically on that goal. You don't want to overload too much commitment, because the whole purpose is that you can get through this program without having to, miss out on your actual work hours and stuff. And another important thing is to log all your hours, because this is all reportable. You can talk about how, what I've noticed, the reason why I log my hours is because of how effective mentoring is. I'm able to like invest 1 to 2 hours a week in a junior developer and introduce him to so much more in the organization where I work that it's beyond calculable. Like how efficient it is in terms of like just me nudging them with where to learn, or them bringing asking for help on something, and instead of me giving them a solution, me just asking them questions and helping them speak their way through their own problem. That type of experience that you're giving these junior developers, that's like time, like it's well worth your time. So logging those hours, by the end of it, you'll be like, oh, I only worked 20 hours this quarter on mentoring, and yet my mentee got promoted. My mentee delivered a brand new project for his boss. It's amazing the what little bit of input, the amount of output you actually get from your mentees. So I wanted to touch on a little bit about like who are you looking for when you're trying to start a mentorship program. So the mentors, what you really want, you do want somebody with experience, but more than anything, you want somebody that knows how to coach somebody. You don't really want somebody that has all the answers. You want somebody that knows how to get to an answer. And so that's why you look for somebody with experience. You look for somebody that's going to be there and available, answer questions for people, help them keep going down their path as they self-guide their way to solving these problems for you and your organization. Another thing that's important too, on the tech side, mentorship, it's almost always paired with actual like coding. So you want somebody too that's really comfortable being like paired programming. This concept is also known as mobbing. It's when multiple developers come together, solve the same problem. You want somebody as a mentor that's completely open to that, and you get the most out of it then. And then for the mentee, you want somebody that's like career motivated. Like they want to move up, they want to learn skills, they don't want to just be where they're at. And you find these people, so when I'm recruiting like intentionally, who I look for, the last mentee I actually recruited, it was somebody who posted on LinkedIn that she was an intern in the same city as somebody else and saw this other intern at the bus stop and never said hi to her. And she posted on LinkedIn and said, hey, I really regret, I never said hi to you. We worked together, and I never said hi to you. Now I'm seeing you on LinkedIn, and I just wanted to say hi now. And that person, I went and asked if they wanted to be a mentee. Because to me, that demonstrates somebody that wants to grow, somebody realized they made a mistake, somebody that understands that it's like tech is actually not about technology. It's about people, it's about the relationships, it's about the skills that we have in tech. So she was demonstrating to me that she was ready to be mentored. And that's one of the reasons why I recruited her. But yeah, you're looking for somebody that knows how to get at a problem, that knows how to talk through it. People that are willing to talk about what they're thinking. Those people make great mentees, they make great employees. Another good use for this type of program, I don't know if you've noticed, but at a lot of orgs, we're very top heavy. There's always tons of seniors, it's very hard to get promotions. When you have a mentorship program, the people that are in that, even though the environment may not be promoting people, they definitely feel like they're being invested in. They feel like they have a future here. And it's like 20 hours a quarter for a mentee, or for a mentor, and you end up just boosting your employees' morale from this. So how do we enable success with the mentorship program? Here's what I've noticed is there are certain expectations, and if you meet them, you get a really good outcome. The first one is you want to make sure you limit the scope. You don't want to just have something that's going to spiral. It's just like work in some ways. You want to have them identify what their goals are early on. They're working towards those goals. They don't go and expand those goals. You also have, for the mentee side, they want to know that what they're trying to build is achievable. So an early proof of concept, what I prefer to do is have them build that, talk them through it. So for instance, in this sample, we are doing custom elements manifest, and we're generating a file, and we're going to build a solution to automate writing the generation of these directories of single directory components. That's their challenge. I want our mentees to build that first proof of concept, that Drupal module that's going to be in development, released on Drupal.org. They will actually go through the process. And the mentors will just be there to encourage them, to answer questions, to help them onboard, understand the technology. And the mentees will actually prove it to themselves. But that should be the first step. And another thing that's important for the mentees, they really have serious schedules. Their school schedule typically is broken up throughout the day. This is one of the hardest things, is lining up schedules, because the mentors' lives are very different than mentees' lives. Mentors' lives, they have very serious schedules. The mentees are always more flexible, and they want flexibility. So working that out early on and making sure that there's an agreement that is met is what will make it work out. They also, one of the reasons to do this for both sides is building your resume. As a mentor or a mentee, it's some experience to share beyond just some project that was delivered. You're actually upskilling. You spent time with an experienced person, and you gained from that. So from the mentor side, they're really looking for mentees that are dedicated. They don't want to feel like they're wasting time. They want to feel like this mentee's going to go somewhere. This is going to be impactful. So the other thing I've noticed that's important for the mentors, they want to start and stop on time. Mentees too, the first few times they show up late. They're typically people. And when the mentor kind of enforces the end time, even though we started late, they learn. They learn to show up on time. They learn, hey, this is a serious opportunity. But I've noticed the mentors, that's very important to them. Mentors also prefer asynchronous communication, some sort of chat in some way. They don't want to always be bothered by the mentee and interrupted. So they prefer to have a way to go back, catch up on their communication, respond to them. They also like to hear the feedback of the experience, because that's truly what this is about, is making sure the mentees have a good experience in the program. So the mentors, they were always asking for feedback. They want to have look backs after different phases are completed. And for the mentors, this is a big resume piece for demonstrating leadership potential. Almost all the mentors that I've worked with, they say they're hoping to be promoted to a tech lead, or they're hoping to be promoted to director. It's a part of that. You don't actually have a leadership opportunity right now. You can join a mentorship program and you have one immediately, and for where are we going with this? So this is actually a legitimate real life example that we're starting in January. I'm starting a 3-month mentorship program with 3 mentees and 3 mentors, specifically for the Drupal community. I currently have myself as a mentor and 1 other committed, 2 mentees already committed, looking for 1 more. The whole purpose is to introduce them to Drupal.org, introduce them to coding a Drupal module that solves a real-world problem for everybody, releasing that module to the Drupal community, understanding how to maintain it. All of these important skills that are out there in everybody's organization, we're going to be training that, teaching that to college students. They're both juniors so far, and I'm still looking for a third. And it's all based on fixing this problem for front-end developers, being able to take a shortcut. You have a web component library. There's a tool that scans it and generates the definition file for you. And then we need the glue that actually generates the single directory components based on this file. And that's what we'll be having the mentors actually do. Promoting that we do have one more slot for mentors and mentees if anybody's interested. You can just email me at matthand.com. In terms of commitment, look, it's not a lot of effort. 1 to 2 hours a week on the mentor side, 2 to 4 hours a week on the mentee side, and the results that you end up seeing are well beyond that commitment level. It's some of the most efficient hours that you're going to end up spending in your organization. So definitely consider starting a mentorship program, solving these kinds of low priority but high impact projects using newer developers with only your experienced developers just providing oversight, encouragement, and upskilling. And for the last Go-Go update, this is my favorite Go-Go song right now. It's Lift Every Voice and Sing, and the band is called Black Alley. I encourage everybody to check them out. They're on YouTube. It was actually, there it is. That's it.
Every voice.
Yeah.
Lift every phone and sing.
Yeah, exactly. But this will give you a good example of Go-Go at its finest. They like to take songs that have already been made and then they remix them as Go-Go songs. Plus, it's just a really beautiful video in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So please check it out. And thank you for participating today. And thank you, Daniel, for co-speaking. And we're at questions. Anybody have questions? Yes.
How do you account for mentorship vis-a-vis billable, chargeable hours?
So I would suggest that you get paid for the organization, but that you can't typically bill them to clients if you're an agency. So it is a part of that, it's not non-billable work, but that's why if you limit the amount of hours actually being generated or being used, you end up seeing a benefit, even though it's not actually directly billable to the client typically.
So are you saying from an employer perspective, account for a percentage of non-billable hours to go into your chargeable hourly rate?
Something like that, yes. That's what I would recommend. That for like an agency, the organization I actually work for is not an agency, so we just all get a salary and we get to mentor and mentee as we see fit. And it works out really well. And all those benefits I'm talking about, you end up seeing. And the people that manage the program, they barely spend any time as well. They just answer an email every few weeks. It's really very straightforward. The mentors and mentees just deal with it themselves. Any other questions? Yes?
Sure. In the spirit of audience participation,
Yes.
can I get a shout out for the managers who are willing to let people mentor and be mentored on company time?
All right, shout out to all the managers that are mentoring people on company time. Good one. Any other questions? Yes.
I'd love to hear more about how web components, are they production ready? Is there cross-browser support? Are you personally using them?
Oh yes, so web components, yes. They're in the enterprise that I work for. They're solving, generally speaking, what they solve for is problems that the design system team has, which is fracturing of the brand. That's the ultimate solution for web components, in my opinion. It enforces brand standards throughout the entire web component library. And when programmers are using those web components, they are not able to change them. So what you end up seeing is more collaboration between your developers and your design system team. Because in the past, there would be another designer in between them that's designing for the project. And the developer would get their design and they modified the components. And the developer would say, okay, well, I'm going to modify the component. You can't do that anymore with web components. So then the developer says to the designer, you need to go speak to the design team in order to get these changes approved. And then the designer goes to the design team to get those changes approved, and the design team says no, 80% of the time, and the brand stays consistent. And it forces those conversations. The other 20% of the time, the design system says, oh, you know what? Your use case actually warrants a sub-brand. You're a subsidiary of our company. You should have a different color scheme. You should have different fonts. And they will go and do that effort, and they'll create a whole another theme using the same web component library, but it's a different color, different fonts, just for that use case.
And as a follow-up, if you don't mind, you know how it's very hard to CSS style file upload box or a select box, whereas like a typical thing that's HTML component you can override with CSS. Are the web components created using this API? Are they overridable with CSS other than the definition, or are they really fixed?
Well, so you can choose to do either. So if you're a design system team, you're building a web component library, you select your input fields, you're able to say, oh, these should live in the light DOM instead of the shadow DOM. If you put a web component in the light DOM, then your local experience teams are able to use CSS to target it. They're able to easily target it with JavaScript from a global scope. It does make their life easier, but it makes their life easier to modify your web component. So typically speaking, the design system teams will put like inputs and selects in the shadow DOM. The shadow DOM is what isolates it away. The local projects are not able to change that at all. But what's great is the design system team then owns it. They're saying, okay, well, this meets accessibility standards. And then when those standards change and somebody says to them, oh, you know what, we can't actually report a placeholder anymore for your select. It's against the accessibility standard. This is a real example. You now have to have a blank. They're able to go back and they reconfigure the web component, and when they push out the change, it automatically switches that for every consumer. So the local teams no longer actually have to do that effort, so it's able to be distributed and consumed easier as well. Which is something that if you're allowing them to override everything, you can't push that out as easily. You push out something like that, it's going to break somebody if they modify it. So keeping it consistent, keeping it in the shadow DOM, that's typically your larger enterprise, that's what their design teams want. Yeah.
Am I understanding this correctly that web components are almost like React's headless components, but supported natively in browser APIs?
That's exactly what they are. Yeah. So they're actually defined in the JavaScript layer too. So you report to the browser how to define this web component. And all it is a custom HTML tag. It comes through with its own template, its own CSS, its own JavaScript encapsulated inside of it. And the pattern I'm seeing now develop, when you want to have something that's agnostic like a web component, but you still serve React, you end up then creating a React wrapper around the web component. And then the tool that Daniel highlighted, that is the go-to solution right now for that. You use custom elements manifest analyzer, you scan your web component library, you then have a script that generates the wrapper files, and it basically just removes dashes and makes things react, their naming convention and everything. But it's all pretty, like that plugin in custom elements and manifest analyzer, I forget what it's called, like Reactify or something like that. It's incredibly useful. It will save you days of having to do that kind of work. And that plugin is very stable. Tons of corporations already support it. it makes it just another build step. So you create your web component library, you want to also have that be a React component, you run this script using custom elements manifest analyzer. And so that concept, that's what we're trying to do on the Drupal side. It's the same thing. Currently, there's no easy solution on the Drupal side to automatically generate your wrapper, which is single directory component, basically. It's the same kind of concept. Yeah.
Do you have any ideas or numbers on the adoption of web components to get a feel of how it's taking on that?
So I do not. My sense, though, is that I would say definitely the majority of large enterprise companies have adopted them. And it's because of being able to lock down your brand. That is why. That's all they really want. And it works very effective for that. But I do notice like web components in use in large businesses all over the place now. It's definitely adopted. And it does, so you end up like gaining a lot, but you do lose some things. You have to teach your developers how to work them. They're custom elements, so you essentially are owning the documentation for it. It's not like you can say, oh, go to Microsoft or Mozilla Developer Network and look at how this element works. Nobody wrote, you own that web component. So not only are you having to create the component, you also need to create the documentation for it. So there's like a whole ecosystem too around managing the documentation. I'm also a proponent for automating that as well, using custom elements manifest analyzer. It's the same thing over and over. You point this tool at your web component library, it generates one massive file, and then you use that file to generate your documentation. Or use it to generate React wrappers or single directory components. But you're going to see custom elements manifest analyzer with web component libraries probably everywhere in a large enterprise. Almost every web component library relies on it in some part of their build step. More questions? Well, thank you for attending. What's next? Is next another session or a break?
Next is lunch.
It's lunch. Enjoy your lunch, enjoy the live music. It's not go-go, I'm sure. But check out the song, Lift Every Voice and Sing when you get a chance. Thanks, everybody.